My mother called on a Thursday morning, and by the time she hung up, I knew my daughter-in-law had made the worst mistake of her life. I'm Bradley Tucker, 60 years old, spent 22 years in the Army as an engineer, and now I run a construction company here in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I've built bridges, fixed what others broke, and learned that the biggest problems usually come from the people you trust most. Standing in my kitchen that Thursday morning, coffee going cold on the counter, I had that familiar feeling from my deployment days, the one that meant trouble was coming, and somebody thought they were smarter than they actually were. It was just past 9 a.m. when my mother Carol called. Carol Henderson, she kept her maiden name after Dad died, said it reminded her who she was before she became a Tucker. No hello, no small talk about the weather. Just my name, dropped flat and careful. Bradley, hey Mom, I turned off the burner. What's wrong? Did Terry's graduation party already happen? There it was. I set my mug down slowly. Terry, my grandson, Glenn and Diane's boy, had just finished his first year at Drake University. Diana had been talking for months about throwing him a party at their place in Ankeny. Big house, nice neighborhood, the kind they mentioned more often than necessary. I figured I'd get a call. Mom definitely should have. She's Terry's great-grandmother, taught him how to fish, and once drove 40 miles in a snowstorm just to watch his high school baseball game. Yeah, I said slowly. I think it was last Saturday. Why? Nobody called me. I felt something cold move through me, not anger yet. Something more like recognition, the way you feel when you spot movement in your peripheral vision during patrol. I called Glenn. She continued to ask about it. He went quiet, then Diane got on the line and laughed, said, "Oh, Mrs. Henderson, the party was last Saturday." Just like that, she laughed. I didn't know it then, but that laugh was going to cost Diane Tucker more than she could imagine. I called Glenn before Mom and I were off the phone. He picked up fast, too fast, the way people do when they're expecting bad news. Dad, it was just Terry's friends, college people. It wasn't really a family thing. She's 83 and lives 20 minutes from you. I know, but that's when I heard it. Diane's voice in the background, not the words, just the tone. Low, urgent, coaching him like a quarterback getting plays from the sideline. "We'll come by," Glenn said finally. "Next week, we'll explain in person." Next week? Dad, please. He hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, and that old Army instinct kicked in. When something doesn't make sense, when people are being evasive, when your gut says something's wrong, you gather intelligence. I called Mom back. "They're coming next week to explain," I told her. She made a sound I remembered from when I was a kid and thought I was being clever about something she already knew. "Mom, what aren't you telling me?" A pause long enough to park a truck in. Janet Phillips was at that party. Janet from First Methodist. She goes to Diane's book club now. She didn't know I hadn't been invited. Mom continued. Called me Sunday to say what a lovely time she'd had. Mentioned meeting a very professional young woman. A lawyer, Sharon, she thought. Had a leather briefcase. The floor shifted under me. A lawyer at a graduation party with a briefcase. Janet said they all went inside for about an hour. Mom continued. Left the kids on the deck. When they came back out, Glenn looked like he'd been told bad news. Diane looked like she'd been told very good news. I didn't speak for a moment. "Mom," my voice came out careful. "You know what I have to ask?" "Yes." "Are they going after the house? The trust?" Carol Henderson had lived in that house for 52 years. Dad had built that trust before he died. Land savings, the kind of quiet wealth that accumulates when you work hard and never show off. 18 acres outside town, accounts worth close to $2.8 million. That would surprise people who saw her as just a sweet old woman who still used a landline. "Bradley," she said, "how long have you known Diane?" "Long enough." "Then you already know the answer. She was right." I'd never been able to put my finger on what bothered me about Diane Tucker. She was polished, said the right things, always volunteering for school events. But there was something underneath it, a calculation that felt like she was always measuring what everything was worth. "I'm going to make some calls," I told her. "I already did," she said, and there it was. That thing in her voice, not fear, not even anger, something almost like amusement. "Bradley, honey," she said. "How do you think I knew to call you on a Thursday morning?" She hung up before I could answer. I stood in my kitchen at 9:47 a.m. and thought about my son who I'd taught to drive, helped through college, and lent money to twice without asking for it back. I thought about Diane, smooth and careful Diane, and the lawyer with the briefcase. And I thought about Mom, 83 years old, who had just hung up on me with the quiet confidence of a woman who was already 3 moves ahead. I pulled up a contact I hadn't used in 2 years. Tommy Rodriguez, Veterans Affairs attorney down in Des Moines, typed 3 words, "Call me, urgent, 7 days." That's how long Glenn and Diane let the silence sit, like they were hoping I'd cool down or convince myself I'd misread the whole thing. 7 days of nothing but a single text from Glenn. Still planning to come Thursday, Dad, with a period, not an exclamation point. The punctuation of a man who'd been coached. I spent that week doing what the Army taught me best, not reacting, not tipping my hand. I made calls, quiet ones. Monday, I drove down to Mom's house, sat at her kitchen table, and listened to everything she had to tell me. The morning after Janet's call, Mom said, stirring her coffee like she was discussing the weather, I got dressed, drove downtown, and walked into the office of Sharon Davis, estate attorney. 4th floor of the Morrison building on Brady Street. You already knew Sharon Davis. She handled the Peterson estate 2 years ago. Margaret Peterson spoke very highly of her. I kept her card, of course she did. Mom still had my 3rd grade report cards in a drawer upstairs. I told her what Janet told me. She asked some questions. Then she made some calls of her own. What kind of calls? Mom set her spoon down with a small, precise click. The kind that confirmed Glenn and Diane had retained a lawyer, Neil Brooks, apparently, office over in West Des Moines, to begin the process of contesting my mental competency. The kitchen went very quiet. Mental competency. Apparently, Mom said, picking up her coffee, I'm too old to make sound decisions about my own estate. I found that interesting, given that I was the one who walked into a lawyer's office without being asked while my son was still processing his feelings in Cedar Falls. She wasn't wrong, Mom. I pressed both hands flat on the table. What they're trying to do, it's not just insulting. It could work if done right. Sharon explained it to me very thoroughly. She also explained what I needed to do to make sure it goes nowhere. She smiled. The same smile she used to give me when I was 16 and thought I was smarter than her. What did you do? We'll get to that. Tommy Rodriguez called me back that afternoon. We'd served together in Afghanistan, different units but same base. He'd gone to law school on the GI Bill after discharge, specialized in veteran affairs and estate protection. Bradley, what's the situation? I told him everything. The party, the lawyer, the competency angle. Tommy listened without interrupting, the way good soldiers do when getting briefed. Here's what you need to know, he said finally. In Iowa, a competency challenge can succeed if they can show declining mental function, inability to manage finances, or susceptibility to manipulation. But it requires medical evaluation, witness testimony, and documented evidence of impaired judgment. Mom's sharp as ever. That's good, but not enough. They'll argue she's vulnerable because of her age and isolation. Did she make any large financial transactions recently? I thought about it. Church donation last year, maybe $25,000. They'll use that, call it impulsive, excessive for someone on a fixed income. It's her money, legally, yes. But in court, it becomes evidence of poor judgment. Bradley, you need to understand, if they can get temporary guardianship pending the competency hearing, they control everything. Bank accounts, property decisions, medical care, everything that hit me like a punch to the gut. What do? Document everything. Medical evaluation showing cognitive function, financial records proving sound decision-making, and most importantly, proof of their real motivation. The money always is. Look, I can't represent your mother directly, conflict since I'm advising you, but I know people, good people, want me to make some calls. Do it. Wednesday evening, I got a call from Sharon Davis herself. Mr. Tucker, your mother asked me to brief you on our progress. Progress. That sounded promising. We've been busy since Monday. Mrs. Henderson underwent a complete cognitive assessment with Dr. Beverly Cole at Cedar Falls Medical. Full battery of tests, memory, reasoning, judgment, financial comprehension. The results were, and I quote Dr. Cole, remarkable clarity for any age, let alone 83.
That's good. It's better than good. It's bulletproof. We've also restructured her estate documents.
New trust structure, updated beneficiaries, ironclad language regarding mental capacity, filed and notarized Tuesday afternoon. What about their competency challenge? Dead in the water before it starts. But here's what's interesting. Mr. Brooks from West Des Moines called today, wanted to discuss a family matter regarding Mrs. Henderson. I informed him that any communication regarding my client should go through me. What did he say? He hung up, rather abruptly. I almost smiled at that. There's one more thing, Mr. Tucker. Your mother has made some significant changes to her estate planning. She wanted you to know that Terry's education is now fully funded through a protected trust. $150,000 untouchable by anyone except him, for educational expenses only. My grandson's future locked away safe. She also wanted me to tell you that Sunday dinner is at 4 p.m. She's making pot roast. Thursday arrived like weather. You've been tracking on radar, you know it's coming, but there's still that moment when it hits and your gut drops. Glenn and Diane pulled into my driveway at 2:15 p.m. in Diane's white Lexus. I watched from the kitchen window for a second before going to the door. Glenn got out first, looked tired and hollowed out. Diane got out second, composed and bright-eyed, wearing that smile I'd spent years trying to decode. Now I had the translation. It meant I want something that isn't mine. I opened the door before they knocked. Dad Glenn stepped forward and hugged me. It was real. The kid still loved me, whatever Diane had talked him into. He was 38 years old, but he'd always be my kid. Come in, I said. I made coffee. Diane kissed my cheek. Bradley, thank you for being patient with us. Patient, right? We sat at the kitchen table. Same table where I'd eaten breakfast as a kid, where Glenn had done homework. Same table that apparently carried no weight for the people sitting at it with a legal strategy. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Glenn said, Dad, we want to talk about Grandma Carol, okay? We're worried about her. Worried how? Diane jumped in, smooth like they'd rehearsed. She's 83, Bradley. Alone in that house, managing significant assets without oversight. Here we go. And some of the decisions she's been making. What decisions, I asked? Diane blinked once. She hadn't expected pushback this fast. Well, she gave a significant sum to her church last year without consulting anyone. It's her money, I said. She can give it to whoever she wants. Dad, Glenn said, nobody's saying she can't. We just think there should be some structure, some oversight to protect her. Protect her. I looked at my son, this kid I'd coached in Little League, driven to college, been proud of his whole life, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Is that why you had an estate attorney at Terry's graduation party? I asked. The air changed instantly. Glenn went still. Diane's smile didn't disappear, but it tightened like a wire under tension. Who told you that? She asked. Her voice stayed level, but I caught the edge in it. Does it matter? We weren't. It wasn't like that. Glenn said, and I could hear the uncertainty creeping in. My son was realizing he might not know the whole story. Sharon Davis, I said. 4th floor, Morrison Building, Brady Street. Diane set her coffee cup down with careful precision. Sharon Davis, I continued, who interestingly enough is the same attorney my mother walked in to see on Monday morning. Beautiful, total silence. The kind you get in the field right before contact, Diane, I said, turning to her directly. You want to tell me what was in that briefcase? Or should I tell you what Sharon told my mother was in it? Whatever color was in Diane's face made a quiet exit. But instead of backing down, I saw something else move in behind her eyes. Something harder. Bradley, she said, and her voice had changed. Sharper now. More real. You have no idea what you're talking about. Neil Brooks, I said. West Des Moines. That name ring a bell. Glenn looked at his wife. It was a fast look, but I'd been reading that kid's face for 38 years. He hadn't known about Brooks. He hadn't known. Glenn, I said, and my voice came out softer than I intended. How much of this did you actually know about? Enough. Diane said before Glenn could answer. We were protecting the family's interests. That's all this ever was. Carol is 83 and sitting on assets worth nearly $3 million. Assets that could benefit all of us, including Terry. She's sitting on assets that belong to her, I said. That my father built for her. And you used my grandson's graduation party as cover for a legal meeting to start declaring her incompetent. Diane stood up abruptly, and for the first time since I'd known her, the mask slipped completely off. Incompetent. She laughed, but it wasn't pleasant. Bradley, wake up. She's 83 years old, living alone in a house that's falling apart, sitting on prime real estate that could set Terry up for life. And instead she's giving it away to churches and keeping it locked up in trusts that help nobody. It's her money, it's family money. Diane's voice rose for the first time. Glenn works construction, we have a mortgage, Terry's got 3 more years of college, and his great-grandmother is sitting on enough money to solve all of that. But instead, we're supposed to just wait around hoping she remembers us in her will. Glenn was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. That's not. Diane, that's not what we talked about. What did you think we were talking about, Glenn? She turned on him. You think I spent months researching competency law for fun? You think I arranged that meeting with Brooks because I was bored? The kitchen got very quiet. Jesus, Diane, Glenn said, and his voice was barely above a whisper. You planned this whole thing. I planned to secure our family's future. Yes, while you sat around feeling guilty about asking for help. I watched my son's face as he processed this. Watched him realize that the woman he'd been married to for 19 years had been running a con, and he'd been the unwitting front man. Here's what you need to understand, I said, keeping my voice level despite wanting to throw Diane out of my house. My mother knows. She knew before I did. She was in Sharon Davis's office on Monday while you were still deciding what to wear to this meeting. Diane went very still. Sharon Davis is no longer a family friend you happened to meet. She's Carol's attorney of record. And as of Tuesday, my mother has made some changes to her estate documents. I paused, watching Diane's face. Sharon was kind enough to let me know they've been filed and notarized. new trust structure, updated beneficiaries, ironclad language regarding mental capacity. Oh, and a full cognitive assessment from Dr. Beverly Cole showing remarkable clarity for any age. Diane sat back down slowly. What I do know, I continued, is that the competency challenge you were building, it's dead. Sharon said the documentation they put together would take a team of lawyers 2 years to untangle and still go nowhere. You're bluffing, Diane said, but her voice had lost its edge. Brooks called Sharon's office yesterday. Wanted to discuss a family matter. She told him any communication about her client should go through her. He hung up. The silence stretched out until Glenn finally spoke. Dad, he said quietly, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I thought we were just worried about her living alone. I looked at my son. I didn't say it was okay because it wasn't. But I could see he was as blindsided as I'd been a week ago. There's one more thing, I said. Terry doesn't know what that party was really about, does he? Glenn shook his head slowly. He's gonna find out, I said. Not from me, but he's gonna find out. When he does, that's between you and him. Diane was staring at the table, probably calculating her next move, but I could see in her face that she was out of moves. You know what the worst part is? I said to her, you had a good life. Glenn's a good man. Terry's a great kid. You had everything you needed. But it wasn't enough, was it? You had to have what wasn't yours. You don't understand the pressure. I understand plenty. I stood up. I understand that you used my grandson's achievement as cover for fraud. I understand that you were willing to destroy an 83-year-old woman's dignity for money. And I understand that you just destroyed your own family for something you were never going to get. I walked to the front door and opened it. I think we're done for today. They left at 3:40 p.m. Glenn looked back once like he wanted to say something, but Diane grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the car. I watched the white Lexus back out and disappear down the street, thinking about how some betrayals take years to plan and seconds to execute. Then I called Mom. How'd it go? She asked. Glenn didn't know the whole plan. Diane did. I figured as much. That woman's been measuring my furniture since the day she married him. Mom, I leaned against the counter. What exactly did you change in those documents? That sound again, that infuriating, magnificent Carol Henderson sound. I told you, Bradley, a woman's finances are her own business. Mom, I'll see you Sunday for dinner. I'm making pot roast, and Terry's coming. She hung up before I could ask how she'd arranged that. Sunday pot roast? That's how my mother chose to detonate a bomb over pot roast, dinner rolls, and sweet tea at a table set for 5 in the house where I grew up. She'd ironed the tablecloth. When Carol Henderson irons the tablecloth, you know something significant is about to happen. 4 p.m., I pulled up to her driveway and immediately noticed 2 things. First, Glenn's car was already there. Second, so was Terry's beat-up Honda with the Drake University sticker. She'd invited Terry without telling anyone else. Strategic as always. I walked in through the front door. You never knock at Carol's main, and found Glenn at the kitchen table looking like a man waiting for sentencing. Terry sat next to him, 19 years old and scrolling his phone with the beautiful obliviousness of someone who had no idea what was about to happen. Diane sat across from them, spine straight, hands folded like she was chairing a board meeting she was determined to control. Mom was at the stove, stirring. Bradley, she said without turning around, hang your coat. Dinner's in 20 minutes. Great-grandma, Terry said, looking up from his phone. Smells incredible in here. Thank you, baby. How are your classes coming? Good. Professor Williams gave me an extension on my economics paper, so I'm basically living my best life. Hard work pays off, Mom said, still stirring. The irony in that sentence was load-bearing, and only 3 people in the room understood why. Dinner was the most elaborate performance of normal I'd ever witnessed. Mom served pot roast, roasted carrots, dinner rolls from scratch, and sweet tea in the good glasses. She asked Terry about his roommate. She asked Glenn about work. She complimented Diane's earrings, which made Diane visibly uncertain whether she was being welcomed or set up. Both, Diane. The answer was both. Terry ate like only a 19-year-old can, enthusiastically and without guilt, completely unaware that every piece had been arranged on a chessboard and every move had been planned. Then Mom set down her fork, folded her napkin, and placed it beside her plate with that small, precise click I'd heard before. The sound of a woman ready to finish what she'd started. Terry, she said pleasantly, I have something I'd like to give you. Terry looked up, roll halfway to his mouth. Yeah. Mom reached into her cardigan pocket and produced an envelope. Cream-colored, heavy paper sealed. She slid it across the table to him. Great grandma, what is this? Open it, sweetheart. I watched his face as he read. The casual ease faded, replaced by concentration, then confusion, then something slower and more serious moving in behind his eyes. Glenn was watching too. His fork had stopped moving entirely. Great grandma, this says. This is a check. It is. This is a really large check, like $150,000 large. Your great-grandfather worked very hard, Terry. So did I. You're gonna finish that degree and do something that matters. The money is for your education only. Mom, Dad, did you know about— No, Diane said quickly, but I heard the strain in her voice. There's a condition. Mom continued calmly. It goes directly into an account in your name only. Not a joint account, not a family account. Yours. Sharon Davis's office set it up on Tuesday. It's already been transferred. The check is just ceremony. The table was silent except for the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. I also want you to know, Mom said, picking up her sweet tea, that I've updated my estate documents. Everything has been restructured. Sharon was very thorough. She took a sip. The house, the trust your great-grandfather established, all the accounts, everything has been reorganized to ensure it goes where it should. She paused, looking directly at Diane. I also want to mention that I've been evaluated by Dr. Beverly Cole at Cedar Falls Medical Center. Full cognitive assessment, memory, reasoning, judgment, financial comprehension. Passed with what Dr. Cole called remarkable clarity for any age, let alone 83. Sharon has the report. It's been filed with the county. The crack I'd seen in Diane's composure on Thursday split wide open. Carol, she started, but her voice was tight. Diane. Mom's voice didn't harden. It just settled like concrete setting. I know about Neil Brooks. I know about the meeting at Terry's party. I know what was in that briefcase. Terry turned to look at his parents slowly, the way you turn toward a sound you're not sure you actually heard. What briefcase, he said. Nobody answered. What meeting? His voice had changed, the easy college kid warmth gone. Something flatter and more adult underneath. What are you talking about, great-grandma? Mom looked at her great-grandson with pure, uncomplicated love. Ask your parents, baby. I think it's time they told you about the lawyer they met with during your graduation party. The one they brought to discuss having me declared mentally incompetent so they could control my finances. The silence that followed was deafening. Terry set down his roll and turned to face his mother. You did what? Terry, we were trying to protect— You brought a lawyer to my graduation party? His voice was getting louder. You used my graduation to plan. What exactly? Glenn found his voice finally. Son, your mother thought great-grandma might need some help managing. Stop. Terry held up his hand. Just stop. He looked at Diane. Mom, did you or did you not bring a lawyer to my party to discuss having great-grandma declared incompetent? Diane's mouth opened and closed twice before she managed. It's complicated. No, it's not complicated. It's a yes or no question. When Diane didn't answer, Terry turned to his father. Dad, Glenn looked like he was going to be sick, yes, but I didn't know the full extent you used my graduation. Terry's voice was flat now, completely controlled. You used my party, my achievement, my friends, as cover to plan taking away great-grandma's rights. We weren't taking away— What do you call having someone declared mentally incompetent? Terry stood up. What do you call that, Mom? For the first time in the 19 years I'd known Diane, she had no answer. Terry, I said gently, your great-grandmother has been several steps ahead of this the whole time. How long have you known Grandpa Bradley? About a week. Your great-grandmother called me when she realized what was happening. Terry looked around the table at his mother, who couldn't meet his eyes, at his father, who looked like he'd been gut-punched, at his great-grandmother, who sat with the calm dignity of someone who just won a chess match that had been rigged against her. Great-grandma, he said, finally, I'm sorry they did this to you. Don't apologize for other people's choices, sweetheart. That's not your burden to carry. Are you okay? I mean, really okay. Mom reached over and patted his hand. I'm 83 years old, Terry. I've survived the Depression, 3 recessions, your great-grandfather's death, and a roof collapse in the winter of 1987. This was Tuesday afternoon paperwork. Terry laughed despite himself. Tuesday afternoon paperwork, with excellent legal counsel. By 6:30 p.m., Glenn and Diane were gone. They'd left in separate cars, Glenn in his truck looking like a man who needed to think, and Diane in her Lexus looking like a woman who just realized her carefully laid plans had not only failed but blown up in spectacular fashion. Sometimes the people who look the most vulnerable are actually the most dangerous because they've had 80 years to perfect the art of letting others underestimate them. The biggest mistake you can make in any battle is assuming your opponent doesn't know they're in one. My mother had been fighting this war since the day Diane walked into our family, and we just didn't realize it until she'd already won.